I'm taking a little break from Miami Beach. I'm here in the Adirondacks in New York. I come up here sometimes to read a couple books, really reflect on things. It's extremely peaceful and it gives me great clarity of mind. The Boston Transcript once printed, "Here lies the body of William J. He died maintaining his right of way. He was right, dead right as he sped along, but he's just as dead as if he were wrong." What that poem means is that you can be right in your argument and you could be arguing against somebody else and they're dead wrong, but you proving yourself right isn't going to get what you want from that other person. You're both going to leave disliking each other, and there was really no point to the argument altogether. If you're not getting what you want from the other person, then you might as well have just lost. The only way to win an argument is to just not have one. You don't win an argument because if you end up winning and proving your point, then the other person's going to be resentful and not like you too much after. If the other person wins and proves their point, then you're going to look kind of dumb and you're going to feel resentful and you're not going to like them too much either. Although arguments don't need to happen, disagreements are extremely healthy when it comes to business partnerships and friendships and anything like that. The way I look at disagreements is nobody would be wasting their time on a disagreement if you didn't have a passion for this topic in common. So here are some tips to make a disagreement successful.
Backbeat, the word is on the street that the fire in your heart is out. I'm sure you've heard it all before, but you never really had a doubt. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now.
Buddha said that hatred is never ended by hatred, but instead by love. And that brings me to a Confucius quote. Confucius said that holding on to a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. There's just no point. So when you argue with hatred, when you argue with like disdain and dislike, you're never going to get to a point where you can come to an agreement. Each person is just going to keep on holding onto their side tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And the way to get past that is to show a little bit of understanding. If you start with some things that you guys agree on, and you're going to have to take the lead on this, the other person isn't going to know how to have a successful disagreement. The first and possibly the most important guideline so a disagreement doesn't turn into an argument is to embrace the disagreement. If you have two people that think the same way, then one of those people is useless. A disagreement really lets you open up and it challenges your way of thinking because you really could be wrong. The second way for a disagreement not to turn into an argument is to distrust your initial feelings. Initially, you're going to feel defensive and you're going to really just want to dig in your heels and just keep and battle. And you really just want to push that down. You don't want to battle. You want to take their points because you want them to take your point. The third guideline to make a disagreement not turn into an argument is to just control your temper. You want to control your temper for many reasons. The first reason is so it doesn't turn into an argument, but the second reason is right when you get angry, you lose the argument. The person that gets angry first loses. They start seeing red, they start saying things they don't mean, they start saying things that don't even make sense. The fourth guideline to make sure a disagreement doesn't turn into an argument is to listen first. Let your opponent speak first because you want them to get whatever they have off their chest. But really listen. Don't build more barriers because there's already a barrier. There's already something that you guys disagree on, and if you let them talk and then you disrupt, your opponent's just going to shield up, dig in harder, and create higher barriers. The goal here is to take away barriers, so listen first and try to understand. The fifth way to make sure a disagreement doesn't turn into an argument is to focus on things you guys agree upon first. In their initial statement, when they're talking before you speak, listen to things that you might agree on, and then when you start to speak, bring those things up first because that's going to really catch the other person off guard when you start agreeing with them, and it's going to really make the situation a lot less tense. The sixth way to make sure a disagreement doesn't turn into an argument is to be honest with yourself. If they're making good points and it's contrary to what you think, actually acknowledge them, and if you're wrong, acknowledge that you're wrong. That is the biggest way to make your opponent feel a little off balance because it really just disarms them. It disarms the whole entire situation, which is what you're going for. So if they're making valid points and then you see error in your thought, bring that up second. After your agreements, bring up secondly the error that you have in your thoughts. The seventh way to make sure an argument doesn't arise from a disagreement is to actually consider your opponent's points. Take time to consider your opponent's points because they might be right. And the last thing you want is for your opponent to say, well, we tried to tell you, but you just wouldn't listen. So actually take time to think about your opponent's points. And then you doing that, it will allow your opponent to take time to think of yours. The eighth way to make sure an argument doesn't arise from a disagreement is to be sincerely thankful that your opponent is actually disagreeing with you here. It proves that they care about the same things that you care about, And also, like I said in the very, very first point, two people with the same point of view, one of them is useless. And you certainly don't want to be useless, and they may have brought up some great points and changed your way of thinking a little bit. The ninth and last way to make sure an argument doesn't arise from a disagreement is to postpone action. You don't want to make a hasty decision right after a disagreement. You actually want to take some time and think about each other's points. You want to give them time to think about your points. So postpone and maybe have another meeting later that day, even the next morning, and really ask yourself some hard questions. Ask yourself, was he right in this scenario? Was I right in this scenario? And like in a point before, you really have to be honest. So the 9 rules to make sure a disagreement doesn't turn into an argument is 1, welcome the disagreement. 2, ignore your initial instincts to get defensive. 3, keep an even temper. 4, listen first. 5, look for places where you both agree. 6, be honest and look inward to see if your opponent has an actual point. 7, promise to think about your opponent's ideas, giving them a chance to think about yours. 8, be thankful that your opponent took the time to disagree with you on this thing and actually be honest with their disagreements. And last but not least, number 9, postpone any hasty decisions. Take time to think about each other's arguments, not arguments, disagreements, and then come back later to make a decision.